Emily was a 20-year-old girl who loved to explore. She enjoyed discovering new places and meeting new people. One day, she had a big dream to visit Paris. Paris was a grand city with many famous landmarks. Emily felt very happy thinking about her trip. When Emily was a child, she often looked at maps and read books about faraway cities. Paris was always her favorite city. She wanted to see the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and Notre-Dame Cathedral. These places made her feel very excited. One day, Emily talked to her best friend, Sophie. "I want to visit Paris," Emily said with a big smile. "It is an amazing city with so much history and culture." Sophie smiled back at her and said, "You should go, Emily. You are young and you love adventure. This is the perfect time to explore the world. You will have many great experiences." Sophie's words made Emily think. She decided to make her dream come true. Emily was a little nervous, but she was also very excited. She was ready for the adventure. Emily spent the next few days thinking about her trip. She imagined herself in Paris, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, exploring the Louvre Museum, and walking along the Seine River. She knew planning a trip would take a lot of work, but she was ready for the challenge. Emily's parents were very supportive. They knew she loved to travel and explore new places. They encouraged her to be careful and to make the most of her journey. Emily promised them she would plan well and stay safe. With her parents' support, Emily felt very excited. She could not wait to start planning her trip to Paris. Emily sat down with her laptop and a notebook. She was ready to start planning. She made a list of things to do. First, she needed to research Paris thoroughly. Then she needed to decide on the places she wanted to visit. Next, she needed to book her flight and hotel. And finally, she needed to prepare her documents. There was so much to do. Emily planned her days in Paris carefully. She made a detailed schedule. On the first day, she would visit the Eiffel Tower and the Arc de Triomphe. On the second day, she would explore the Louvre Museum and the Tuileries Garden. She also planned to visit Notre-Dame Cathedral. Emily wanted to make sure she had time to see everything. Now, Emily needed a place to stay. She wanted a safe and comfortable place that was not too expensive. She read many reviews and looked at pictures of hotels and hostels. Finally, she found a nice hostel in the Marais district. It was perfectly located near many attractions. Emily checked her passport to make sure it was valid. She confirmed she had the right visa for her stay in France. She made copies of her passport, flight tickets, and hostel booking, just in case. She also made a careful budget for her trip. She needed money for the hostel, food, transportation, and sightseeing. Emily saved money from her part-time job. She didn't want to carry too much cash, so she got a travel card that she could use like a debit card in Paris. Emily also wanted to stay in touch with her family and friends. She found out that international roaming for her phone would be expensive, so she decided to buy a local SIM card in Paris. This way, she could use the internet and make calls without spending too much money. Emily also read about French culture and customs. She learned about French manners and some common phrases. She wanted to be polite and fit in with the locals. She even practiced saying some French words, determined to at least master basic greetings and courtesies. She downloaded a French language app and practiced every evening. The night before her trip, Emily was very busy. She made sure everything was ready. She double-checked her packing list. She packed her clothes, toiletries, and documents. She put her bags by the door so she would not forget them in the morning. The next morning, Emily woke up early. She got dressed and had a quick breakfast. She grabbed her bags and headed to the airport. Her parents drove her to the airport and helped her with her bags. They hugged her and wished her a great trip. The flight was long, but Emily kept herself busy. She read her guidebook, listened to French language lessons, and watched a movie about Paris. As the plane began to descend, Emily looked out the window. She could see the city of Paris below. Her heart raced with excitement. She couldn't believe she was finally here. She was finally in Paris, ready to start her adventure. Emily took a taxi from Charles de Gaulle Airport to her hostel. The city looked amazing from the window. She saw glimpses of famous landmarks on the way. When she arrived at the hostel in the Marais, she checked in and found her room. It was small but cozy. She met her roommates who were also travelers. They were friendly and shared their travel stories. Emily felt comfortable and excited to make new friends. On her first day in Paris, Emily woke up early. She was full of excitement. She got dressed and had breakfast at the hostel's café, a perfect French croissant and coffee. She talked to some other travelers and got tips on where to go and what to see. They recommended starting with the Eiffel Tower early to avoid the crowds. Emily decided to follow their advice. She walked to the nearest metro station and figured out how to buy a ticket. She enjoyed the ride and looked at the city through the windows of the train. When she emerged from the metro station, she saw the Eiffel Tower rising before her. It was even more impressive in person than she had imagined. The iron lattice work seemed to stretch endlessly into the blue Parisian sky. After visiting the Eiffel Tower, Emily decided to explore more of central Paris. She walked along the Seine River, watching the boats glide by and admiring the historic bridges. The autumn air was crisp, and the city buzzed with energy. She stopped to watch street artists sketching portraits of tourists near the riverbanks. For lunch, Emily found a charming café in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. She tried her first authentic French onion soup and a croque-monsieur. It was delicious, and she loved watching the locals chat animatedly over their long lunches. She was beginning to understand why Paris was famous for its food culture. In the afternoon, Emily visited the Louvre Museum. She had read about its vastness, but nothing prepared her for its scale. She spent hours exploring the galleries, marveling at the Mona Lisa, the Venus de Milo, and countless other masterpieces. The ornate ceilings and grand hallways were as impressive as the art they housed. After the Louvre, Emily walked through the Tuileries garden. The perfectly manicured trees and fountains created a peaceful haven in the heart of the city. She found a chair near a fountain and sat for a while, watching children sailing toy boats on the small pond. An accordion player nearby filled the air with traditional French melodies. As evening approached, Emily made her way to Montmartre. She climbed the steps to Sacré-Cœur Basilica, stopping occasionally to catch her breath and admire the expanding view of Paris. At the top, she watched the sunset paint the city's rooftops in shades of gold and pink. For dinner, Emily found a small bistro recommended by her hostel roommate. She tried escargots for the first time, surprised by how much she enjoyed them. Her main course was coca au vin, and she finished with a perfect crème brûlée. The waiter helped her practice her French, patiently correcting her pronunciation with a kind smile. The next day, Emily decided to join a walking tour she'd heard about from other travelers at her hostel. She met the group near Notre-Dame Cathedral early in the morning. The tour guide was a lively Parisian named Marie, who had been leading tours for 5 years. In the group were travelers from Australia, Brazil, Japan, and Canada, all eager to discover Paris's secrets. As they walked through the Latin Quarter, Emily found herself chatting with Clara, a Brazilian student who was also traveling solo. They discovered they both shared a love for photography and French cinema. The tour took them through narrow medieval streets, while Marie shared fascinating stories about the city's history, from the Roman times to the French Revolution. During their lunch break, Emily, Clara, and two other travelers from the tour, Tom from Australia and Yuki from Japan, decided to have lunch together at a small crêperie. They shared stories about their home countries and travel experiences while enjoying both sweet and savory crepes. Emily was amazed at how easy it was to connect with people from such different backgrounds. After lunch, the group continued their tour through Le Marais, exploring its trendy boutiques and historic Jewish quarter. They all exchanged contact information and made plans to meet for dinner the following evening. Emily felt a warm sense of belonging, realizing that solo travel didn't mean being alone. That evening, back at the hostel, Emily joined a French wine tasting event organized for the guests. The hostel owner, Madame Dubois, taught them about different French wine regions and proper tasting techniques. Emily met more travelers, including Sarah from Canada, who was studying art history in Paris, and offered to show her some hidden artistic treasures of the city. The evening turned into an impromptu international dinner party, with guests sharing snacks from their home countries and teaching each other phrases in their native languages. Emily taught everyone the happy birthday song in English, while learning how to say cheers in 5 different languages. The hostel's common room was filled with laughter and conversation late into the night. Emily decided to explore beyond Paris's city limits. She woke up early one morning and packed a small bag with water, snacks, and her camera. Her first destination was the Palace of Versailles. She took the RER train from Paris, enjoying the changing scenery as the urban landscape gave way to suburbs. When she arrived at Versailles, Emily was awestruck by the palace's grandeur. The golden gates gleamed in the morning sun, and the massive courtyard was already filling with visitors. She had booked her ticket online, following Sarah's advice from the hostel. Inside, she marveled at the hall of mirrors, imagining the grand balls and ceremonies that once took place there. The palace gardens were even more impressive than she'd imagined. Emily spent hours exploring the meticulously manicured gardens, ornate fountains, and Marie Antoinette's Hamlet. She joined Clara and Tom from the walking tour, who had coincidentally planned their Versailles visit for the same day. Together, they rented bikes and rode around the Grand Canal, stopping for a picnic lunch with baguettes and cheese they'd brought from Paris. The next day, Emily took another day trip, this time to Giverny to visit Monet's gardens. The train journey was short, and she used the time to read about the Impressionist painter's life. When she arrived, the famous water lily pond was in full bloom. She spent hours photographing the Japanese bridges and colorful flower gardens that had inspired so many of Monet's masterpieces. On her way back to Paris, Emily met an American family on the train. They shared stories about their travels, and the mother, an art teacher, gave Emily fascinating insights about Monet's painting techniques. They exchanged email addresses, and the family invited her to visit them if she ever came to Chicago. Later that week, Emily joined a small group tour to the Champagne region. They visited historic cellars in Reims, learned about the champagne-making process, and enjoyed tastings at several famous houses. Emily particularly enjoyed learning about the monk Dom Perignon and his contributions to champagne production. The group also visited the stunning Rennes Cathedral, where French kings were once crowned. During her trip, Emily faced several challenges that tested her resilience, but ultimately made her stronger. One afternoon, after visiting the Musée d'Orsay, she got lost in the winding streets of the left bank. Her phone battery had died, and she couldn't remember the name of her hostel's street in French. At first, panic set in, but she remembered the basic French phrases she'd practiced. Gathering her courage, Emily approached a kind-looking elderly woman at a cafe. Using her broken French and hand gestures, she managed to explain her situation. The woman, Madame Laurent, not only helped her find her way, but insisted on walking with her to ensure she got back safely. They chatted along the way, with Emily learning new French phrases and stories about old Paris. Another challenge arose when Emily lost her metro pass. She spent a stressful hour at the transit office, trying to explain her situation in French. Though frustrated at first, she was proud when she managed to get a replacement pass entirely in French. The office worker even complimented her improving language skills. The weather also presented challenges. One day, an unexpected rainstorm caught her without an umbrella while she was sketching in the Luxembourg Gardens. Rather than letting it ruin her day, she found shelter in a nearby bookshop, Shakespeare and Company. There, she spent a magical afternoon browsing ancient books and chatting with other readers who had escaped the rain. Emily also faced the challenge of dining alone. Initially self-conscious, she decided to embrace it. She began bringing her journal to cafes and restaurants, writing about her experiences while enjoying her meals. Soon she looked forward to these solo dining adventures, finding them peaceful and empowering. One evening, she accidentally ordered tripe at a restaurant, not knowing what it was. Instead of being embarrassed, she decided to try it anyway. While it wasn't to her taste, the experience made her more adventurous with future menu choices. The waiter, impressed by her willingness to try new things, brought her a complimentary dessert and taught her more about French cuisine. As her time in Paris drew to a close, Emily wanted to make her final days memorable. She spent a morning at the famous Marché aux Puces flea market, searching for perfect souvenirs for her family and friends. She found a vintage French cookbook for her mother, an old map of Paris for her father, and some unique costume jewelry for her best friend back home. In the afternoon, she visited her favorite spots one last time. She returned to the Eiffel Tower, this time going up to the top. The view was different now. She could recognize neighborhoods and landmarks that had become familiar during her stay. She spotted the cafe where she'd first tried escargot, the bookshop that had sheltered her from the rain, and the garden where she'd spent peaceful afternoons reading. Emily also did some last-minute shopping along the Champs-Élysées. She bought macarons from La Durée to take home, carefully selecting a rainbow of flavors. She treated herself to a small silk scarf from a French boutique, a memento of her Parisian adventure that she could wear back home. That evening, she met with all the friends she'd made during her stay for a farewell dinner. Clara, Tom, Yuki, and Sarah had organized it at a charming bistro in Le Marais. They shared stories about their favorite moments in Paris, exchanged contact information, and promised to keep in touch. The waiter, who recognized Emily from her previous visits, brought them complimentary champagne to celebrate their friendship. Back at the hostel, Emily began the bittersweet task of packing. She carefully wrapped her souvenirs and arranged her belongings, discovering metro tickets and museum maps that brought back memories of her adventures. Madame Dubois, the hostel owner, helped her book a taxi for the airport and gave her a small package of fresh croissants for her journey. On her last morning, Emily woke up early to walk along the Seine one final time. The city was quiet, just beginning to stir. Street sweepers were cleaning the sidewalks, and early morning joggers nodded hello as they passed. She sat on a bench near Notre-Dame, watching the sunrise paint the cathedral in soft, golden light, feeling grateful for all the experiences she'd had. The morning of her departure, Emily took one last look at her room in the hostel before heading to the airport. Her taxi driver, sensing her melancholy, shared stories of other travelers he'd driven, reminding her that au revoir means until we meet again in French. Emily smiled, already dreaming of her next visit to Paris. At Charles de Gaulle Airport, she checked in for her flight and went through security. She had time before boarding, so she wandered through the duty-free shops, picking up last-minute chocolates and a small bottle of French perfume. As she waited at her gate, she began writing in her journal, trying to capture her final thoughts about her Parisian adventure. On the flight home, Emily reflected on how much she had grown. She was no longer the nervous traveller who had arrived in Paris weeks ago. She had learned to navigate a foreign city, speak basic French, make friends from around the world, and solve problems on her own. She felt more confident and independent than ever before. When she landed, her family was waiting at the airport with excited smiles. They hugged her tightly, eager to hear about her adventures. On the drive home, Emily shared stories about the magnificent architecture, the delicious food, and the wonderful friends she'd made. Her parents listened proudly, noticing how their daughter had matured during her time abroad. At home, Emily unpacked her souvenirs, each item bringing back vivid memories. She arranged her photos and ticket stubs in a scrapbook, writing captions to preserve the stories behind each moment. She hung the vintage Paris map her father had loved on her wall, next to her own photographs of the city. Over the next few days, Emily received messages from her Paris friends. Clara was planning a trip to Brazil and invited Emily to visit. Tom shared photos from their day at Versailles, and Sarah sent a link to an online French language group they could both join. Emily realized that her Paris adventure had given her not just memories, but lasting friendships that would continue to enrich her life. As she settled back into her routine, Emily found herself changed by her journey. She approached challenges with new confidence, knowing she could handle whatever came her way. She continued practicing French and reading about Paris, keeping her connection to the city alive. Most importantly, she had discovered a passion for travel and cultural exchange that would shape her future adventures. Emily's heart was full of gratitude for the beautiful city that had taught her so much about herself and the world. She knew that Paris would always hold a special place in her heart, not just as a destination she had visited, but as the place where she had discovered her own strength and independence. The end of this journey was just the beginning of many more adventures to come. Emily was already dreaming about her next destination, knowing that travel had become an essential part of who she was. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video.